Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So let's continue with our Angular series. So in this we will learn about Angular directives. So basically Angular directives are classes that add behavior to your elements which act as instructions to the DOM, which is basically used to manipulate the DOM to change the layout, structure or appearance of the DOM. You can see other uses of the directives here. Now we have three types of directives. Structural, which is for changing the DOM layout structure. We have ngIf, ng for, ng-switch. Attribute, which is used to change the appearance and behavior. We have ng-class for adding or removing CSS from classes dynamically. ng-style for inline styling. Now components. These are special type of directives, basically custom directive we can say, which have its own template. So these two don't have their own templates, but components have their own template. For creating a custom directive, we have at the rate directive decorator, which is used. We can see from this example. Now we will study all these directives in some depth, like structural directive. So this is for DOM manipulation. Now ngIf is used for adding or removing any element based on some conditions, like if this flag is true, do this work. Okay, ng-for is for looping. Like I have a list with 5 items and I want to display all those items, so I will use ng-for. So basically looping through a collection. ng-switch is for conditional rendering, and Angular's new directives are also introduced from Angular 17 onwards. These are for, switch, if, and there are many more like differ, placeholder. Now we will study for. So for is a replacement for ng-for. Now why for is used? For is used because it has its own inline track. What is track? Basically ng-for uses track by, but these track by we have to explicitly declare. We have to create track by id, suppose this, and then we can use it, but it doesn't have this inbuilt. So for has this track inbuilt, so because of that our performance is improved. Now the question is, what is this track by? So track by worked with ng-for, and this is basically keeping track of items, okay, not the index. Basically used to track the item identity instead of index. So hence preventing what? Re-rendering. So what earlier used to happen when we don't have track by, Angular used to re-render for any type of array changes. So because of that unnecessary re-rendering, our performance was low, speed was low. So to improve that, we started using track by. Track by function was used to give the value, of that item which is unchanged. And because of that, our performance was improved because rendering was not done and it was reused by the Angular. So basically reusing the existing DOM elements. So when looping without track by, Angular destroys and recreates DOM elements on any array changes, but with track by it reuses. Now we have attribute directives. These are behavior or styling. ng class for dynamically applying CSS classes, ng style for inline CSS styles, ng mol for two-way data binding. Now these questions can be asked in your interview, like what is a directive in Angular? So we can simply say that it is a class which adds behavior to an element. Where in Angular templates, don't forget to mention this. So it can change the DOM layout or appearance. What are the types? Structure, attribute, components we know. What's the difference between ng-for and for? Right, for has inline track, ng-for supports track by function, which is separate. Okay. For is introduced in Angular 17, so it has faster rendering, modern syntax, inline tracking. Loop syntax with inline track, in which here in for we have this inline track. And one more important thing is that this for with inline track also supports at the rate empty decorator, which handles empty arrays. Okay, so this was not present in ng4. What is track by and why it is important? So okay, track by tells Angular how to uniquely identify any item in a loop. So hence it is preventing unnecessary rendering, so improving the performance. Can we use at the rate for? No, Baba, we cannot use this because it was introduced only from Angular 17 versions. What is the difference between structure attribute? Structure is for changing the DOM layout or structure, attribute for behavior or styling. How do you create a custom directive? We use at the rate directive decorator. Why is track by important in large list? Okay, so large list, because if the large list is updating its data, its item frequently, then we use track by to prevent re-rendering every time, and we can get the item whenever we need it if it is unchanged. Okay, so it's improving the performances. When should you prefer at the rate for? Obviously, if we are using any latest version, then we should use at the rate for, or because it has inbuilt track, so for improving the performances we can use for. We have at the rate if also, which replaces ngif and ng template, and this supports else if. Now we have deferrable loading directives. These directives basically help some parts of HTML to load lately, to load later in time whenever they are triggered. So for delaying some parts, rendering of some parts, we are using deferrable loading directives. We have at the rate defer decorator, at the rate placeholder decorators. Now the summary of this lecture is that Angular directives control DOM behavior or appearance. For is the new faster looping directive. Track by and track optimize rendering. Track by was in ng4 and track was in for. Track by was in ng4. So don't get confused here. This for is in using this track. Okay, structural directives affect what? Layout. Attribute affect what? Behavior. Style behavior, basically this behavior appearance, so attribute is for this. And for layout we have structural directives. Okay, so I hope everything is clear. If you like my content, so please do like, share and subscribe. Let's meet in another video. Thank you.